No press conference, no public ceremony, just a silent, seismic shift inside the palace. Princess Anne made a decision no one expected. She gave Princess Charlotte the royal title once connected to Diana, along with the treasured Spencer tiara. The move was private, personal, and pierced straight through tradition. When Camilla learned the news, she reportedly broke down in tears, a reaction not to jewelry, but to power slipping through her fingers. Diana's legacy had returned, not through memory, but through the next generation. And as Anne passed the torch, the monarchy felt something rare. A future rooted in the past. The unexpected decision that rocked the palace. It wasn't announced with fanfare. There was no press release, no palace photo, just a quiet decision made by Princess Anne, and a ripple that shook the royal institution to its core. Anne, known for her loyalty to protocol and duty, did something no one saw coming. She handed down a title and a legacy directly connected to Princess Diana, and gave it to Princess Charlotte. The move bypassed tradition, bypassed politics, and most notably, bypassed Queen Camilla. Sources say Camilla was informed behind closed doors during a routine meeting meant to discuss ceremonial matters. The moment the news landed, she reportedly froze, then broke down. Tears, not rage. Silence, not protest. But everyone in the room understood. Something enormous had shifted. Because the title in question wasn't just ceremonial, it was once associated with Diana herself and carried the kind of symbolic weight no royal strategy could dilute. For years, the expectation was clear. Any honors tied to Diana's memory would be carefully managed by Charles and Camilla, kept within their realm of influence, distributed only when the time was right. But Anne didn't wait. She acted on instinct, on legacy, and most importantly, on principle. Without warning, she made the call. The title was hers to pass, and she chose Charlotte. Within hours, palace corridors buzzed. Advisors scrambled to understand the implications. Was it official? Could it be walked back? But Anne had already signed off, and what she started couldn't be undone. It wasn't just a decision, it was a message. The monarchy had long wrestled with Diana's shadow, especially Camilla, who for years had tried to distance herself from the pain and public devotion that Diana left behind. But now, with this quiet gesture, Diana's legacy had returned. Not through scandal, but through the next generation. Princess Charlotte didn't ask for the honor, but she had earned it, at least in Anne's eyes. The Princess Royal had watched her closely, and now she had placed a crown of responsibility on a girl whose every move reflected composure beyond her years. As for Camilla, she smiled through her next appearance, but inside, those who knew her said the moment landed hard. Because this wasn't just about a title, it was about who gets to define the royal future and who just got written out of it. Why Charlotte and not Lilibet? The question came instantly. Why Charlotte? Why not Lilibet? From the outside, it seemed like a fair inquiry. Both girls are granddaughters of the crown, both bear royal blood. But inside the firm, the distinction was never blurred, and Princess Anne's decision made that crystal clear. Lilibet Diana Mountbatten-Windsor lives thousands of miles away. Her life is rooted in California, surrounded by celebrity culture and far removed from the daily traditions of royal life. Her parents stepped back, redefining their role outside the institution. They walked away, not in anger perhaps, but with finality. Charlotte, on the other hand, is woven into the monarchy's daily rhythm. From school assemblies to state events, She's present. She's learning, observing, and adapting to royal life not as a fantasy, but as a future. She's steady, emotionally mature, grounded in duty. And for Anne, that mattered more than bloodlines. Those close to the Princess Royal say she's been watching both girls quietly for years, gauging not only how they carry themselves, but how they understand the weight of their lineage. And Anne saw it plainly. Charlotte represents duty. Lilibet represents distance. That phrase wasn't said to be cruel. It was said to be honest. Anne's decision wasn't about competition. It was about continuity. Choosing Charlotte wasn't a dismissal of Lilibet. It was a protection of something deeper. A commitment to a monarchy that Anne believes still matters. One that's fragile, evolving, and in need of a future shaped by character, not headlines. Charlotte had shown signs early on: her posture, her awareness, the way she intuitively steps forward at balcony events or helps calm her younger brother in front of cameras. She doesn't seek the spotlight. She holds it with dignity when it finds her. And that's what Anne recognized. The Spencer lineage, through Diana, needed a new bearer. Someone to carry not just the jewels or titles, but the spirit Diana embodied. Grace under pressure, service without noise, and strength behind a calm face. Camilla may have envisioned a different heir to Diana's image, one she could influence or approve. But that decision was never hers to make. Anne saw what the world is just beginning to understand. Charlotte isn't just the next princess. She's the bridge between the monarchy's past and its uncertain future. Anne and Charlotte, a bond that grew in silence. It didn't begin with strategy. There were no press photos or public narratives, just quiet moments between two royal women from opposite ends of the timeline. One, a lifelong symbol of duty. The other, barely 10 years old, but already carrying the weight of expectation. And somehow, they found each other. Princess Anne never made grand gestures. But over the past 2 years, something shifted. She began spending more time with Princess Charlotte, not in palaces, but at smaller, more private events, garden tours, charity visits, moments far from flashing cameras. At VE Day 2025, the bond was unmistakable. Anne stood tall in uniform, as she always had. But her eyes drifted toward Charlotte often. The young princess stood quietly, hands clasped, absorbing every moment. Observers noted the similarities: Charlotte's posture, her calm focus, the way she responded without needing prompting. It was like watching a reflection of Anne herself decades ago. In the weeks that followed, palace insiders said Anne began speaking more openly to William, not about Charlotte's charm, but about her potential. She praised the child's emotional maturity, her understanding of timing and tone in public. And she expressed one clear hope: that Charlotte would not be lost in the noise of modern royalty. So when Anne made the decision to align Charlotte with Diana's legacy, to pass down the title and begin the path toward Princess Royal, it wasn't ceremonial. It was personal. Because Anne didn't just see a girl. She saw a mirror, a continuation of the legacy she had carried for decades, a legacy rooted in sacrifice, restraint, and unshakable responsibility. Charlotte didn't ask for the attention. She didn't smile for cameras when the news came, but those who know her said she understood the meaning behind it. And for Anne, that was enough. She wasn't choosing a favorite. She was choosing the future. Diana's memory rises again through the tiara. The title was only part of the surprise. What came next sent shockwaves through royal history. The Spencer tiara, A dazzling heirloom that once graced Diana's head on her wedding day had been locked away, seen only at exhibitions and private family occasions. Its appearance was rare, its symbolism even rarer. Many assumed it would eventually be passed down with Camilla's guidance, perhaps reserved for a royal bride approved by the crown. But then came another quiet decision. William personally reached out to Earl Spencer, Diana's brother, with a single heartfelt request. The tiara should go to Charlotte. And he agreed. Anne had already set the title in motion. Now the tiara, the most visible reminder of Diana's presence, would follow. Not to be hidden, not to be controlled, but to be worn by the only young royal who carried Diana's name, her poise, and now her role. Sources say the decision was made weeks before anyone knew. Anne had approved it. William had made the call. And Catherine, in her usual grace, had simply nodded with quiet support. The tiara is being carefully prepared, adjusted for Charlotte's future use. Not now, but when the time is right. When she steps into the public as more than a child of royalty, but as Diana's spiritual heir. And that's exactly what this moment has become. This isn't about jewelry. It's not about protocol. It's about placing a legacy back where it belongs. Not in vaults or memories, but in a future that still reflects the woman who changed everything. Anne knew this wouldn't be received quietly. She understood the emotional weight of reviving Diana's image so publicly. But she also knew it was time. Diana was never meant to fade quietly, and her values, strength through compassion, duty through love, had found a new home in Charlotte. And while one young girl inherits that legacy, another woman in the palace was falling apart. Camilla's silent storm turns to tears. The tears didn't fall in front of cameras. They never do. But behind palace walls, in a private chamber just steps from the Queen's inner office, Camilla finally broke. The news had come in pieces. First the title, then the tiara. She held her smile through the public appearances, through the carefully worded statements. But those closest to her say she crumbled in private. Because this wasn't just about Charlotte. This was about Diana, and the influence that Camilla had spent decades trying to escape. Since marrying Charles, Camilla had fought to build her own identity within the monarchy. Not as Diana's replacement, but as her own woman. She had overcome criticism, harsh headlines, and relentless comparisons. Slowly, she carved out space for herself, a new queen with a softer touch, praised for her accessibility and warmth. But Diana's shadow never fully faded. And now, with one move, Anne had brought it roaring back to life, through Charlotte, through William, through a crown that had never truly moved on. Insiders say Camilla believed she would one day control who wore the Spencer tiara, that it would be gifted only when the past had quieted, that she would guide the narrative, decide the tone. But that power was stripped from her without warning. The moment the final confirmation came, Camilla sat down slowly and said just one thing. It was never mine to begin with. It wasn't the tiara itself, it was the meaning behind it. The public affection, the historic symbolism, the message that no matter how many years pass, Diana's influence still decides the emotional current of the monarchy. And Camilla, once in control, suddenly felt like a guest in the narrative once again. The palace hasn't addressed her reaction publicly. But behind the scenes, the shift is undeniable. Camilla is still queen, still active. But something has changed. Because the future isn't being shaped by her. It's being shaped around her. Catherine's calm support strengthens the choice. While Camilla wept in private, Catherine stood steady. She didn't make speeches. She didn't take credit. But quietly, firmly, she supported everything Anne had set in motion. Because Charlotte wasn't just being honored with a title and a tiara. She was being prepared. Catherine had always taken a different approach to parenting inside the firm. Where others pushed image, she embraced reality. Where others taught tradition, she led by example. Her style echoed Anne's, disciplined, private, and rooted in values, not vanity. It wasn't coincidence that the bond between Anne and Catherine deepened over the last 2 years. They were women who understood the weight of expectation. They didn't need to discuss strategy. They recognized strength when they saw it. During Wimbledon 2024, Catherine was caught on camera calmly placing a hand on Charlotte's back when a crowd grew overwhelming. That simple, wordless gesture went viral, not because it was flashy, but because it was real. It's those moments that shaped Charlotte. Not the tiara, not the headlines, but the guidance of women who carry power without performing it. Anne saw that, and in Catherine, she saw a mother who would protect the title, not just wear it. Behind the scenes, Anne and Catherine met more frequently, shared letters, quiet lunches, planning not just for the present, but for what comes after. They weren't building a princess. They were crafting a royal leader, someone who would carry the monarchy's legacy forward with dignity, not drama. And Charlotte? She already understood the assignment. William's private meeting with Anne Seales. All the setting was ordinary. A post-event reception at the palace, light music in the background, glasses clinking in quiet corners. But behind a tall curtain near the corridor, something extraordinary took place. Princess Anne pulled Prince William aside. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't scheduled. But Anne had been waiting for the right moment, the right silence between duties, to speak as a sister, an aunt, and a guardian of legacy. They talked for nearly 30 minutes. No staff, no aides, just them. Anne didn't begin with formalities. She began with Charlotte. She spoke of the girl's rare sense of awareness, her ability to read a room, her quiet strength. Anne described how she'd seen flashes of herself in Charlotte, but more importantly, flashes of someone else, Diana. William listened, his eyes steady but glassy. He had carried his mother's legacy for decades, first with quiet weight, later with the responsibility of reshaping it for the future. But hearing Anne speak about Charlotte in this way, it cut deeper. It meant the legacy wasn't just in memory. It was alive and growing. Anne didn't push. She simply asked, was he ready for what came next? Was he willing to let Charlotte carry something heavier than attention? A title, a symbol, a torch? William nodded. He didn't hesitate. Insiders say he was deeply moved, not just by Anne's faith in his daughter, but by the clarity of the moment. He saw it plainly. This was more than a family decision. It was the beginning of something bigger. Anne wasn't handing over a title. She was handing over a future. That night, nothing was announced, but everything changed. Anne walked away knowing the path was sealed. William walked back into the room not just as Diana's son, but as the father of her living legacy. Public moments that prove Charlotte is ready. The world hadn't been told yet. The tiara hadn't been worn. The title hadn't been formally announced, but the signs were already there, for anyone paying attention. Charlotte wasn't just a royal child. She was becoming a royal figure. At the 2025 VE Day balcony appearance, she stood between her parents, calm and alert. Her eyes didn't dart. Her smile didn't falter. When her younger brother Louis grew restless, Charlotte turned slightly, gave him a single glance, and he stilled. The moment was small, but the symbolism was undeniable. Later, during Trooping the Color, it happened again. As the crowd roared and cameras flashed, Charlotte instinctively adjusted her posture, took her place just half a step behind William, and gently guided Louis forward without a word. Not for show, not for spectacle, just instinct. Observers began to take note. Commentators pointed out her confidence, her poise, her growing resemblance, not to Catherine or Diana in appearance, but to Anne and Elizabeth in discipline. And then came the moment that truly stayed with the public: Queen Elizabeth's funeral. Among all the grandeur and grief, Charlotte, just a child, walked with grace and composure. She bowed her head at just the right moment, held her hands tightly in front of her, and didn't cry. Not because she wasn't sad, but because she understood something no child her age should have to: what it means to carry the crown silently. These weren't isolated moments. They were patterns. Behaviors of a girl being shaped not for fame, but for purpose. And when the news of the title and the tiara began to spread in hushed tones across the kingdom, the response wasn't confusion. It was acceptance. Because Charlotte hadn't been prepared with press releases. She'd been preparing all along. Anne's legacy continues. Through Charlotte, for decades, Princess Anne had carried the title of Princess Royal like a shield. She never asked for popularity. She never sought power. But she became a force, a silent guardian of royal discipline, the monarch's most reliable presence, and the quiet pulse of duty that ran behind every major event. Now, for the first time, she was planning her next move, not for herself, but for what comes after. Though tradition states the Princess Royal title is held for life, Anne has begun making arrangements for its future. She has no intention of letting it fade. She intends to hand it down, not just with a signature, but with purpose. And for her, Charlotte is the only choice. It's not because she's William's daughter. It's not because she's Diana's granddaughter. It's because she has shown herself worthy, not through words, but through moments. Anne has always valued restraint, composure, quiet leadership, and now she sees those traits, remarkably strong, in a girl not even a teenager. Those close to Anne say she views this not as succession, but continuity, a passing of the flame that must be done carefully and with deep understanding. She doesn't want Charlotte to inherit a title. She wants her to inherit what it means. And so, Anne has been preparing Charlotte quietly. Shared time, gentle guidance, encouragement not to perform, but to endure. Because that's what royalty really is: endurance under pressure. In that way, Charlotte isn't replacing Anne. She's reflecting her. Camilla's influence may stretch wide, but Anne's legacy is about depth. And now that depth lives on, not just in memory, but in a girl who walks corridors she once did, absorbing the same lessons. Through Charlotte, Anne's legacy won't be frozen in history. It will continue to lead. A title, a tiara, and the future of the crown. By the time the palace confirmed the decision, the world already knew. Charlotte was no longer just the middle child of the future king. She was the crown's quiet rising star. With Anne's blessing, Diana's name, and a legacy sealed in both title and tiara, Charlotte had stepped into something far bigger than ceremony. She had become a bridge between eras. The Spencer tiara, once seen as a relic of the past, now shone with new meaning. On Charlotte, it wasn't just about lineage. It was about responsibility. Diana had once broken through royal coldness with heart. Now, Charlotte would preserve that heart with steadiness. Anne made the first move. Catherine ensured the foundation. William gave the nod, and through it all, Charlotte never asked to lead. She simply showed she could. Camilla, meanwhile, remains queen in name. But something has changed. The public no longer sees her at the center. They see her as ceremonial. Present, yes, but not defining. Because now, eyes are on someone else. A girl with quiet eyes, poised hands, and a name that carries the past and the future. One title, one tiara, one girl. And just like that, the crown began to shift. Not with noise, not with scandal, but with grace. The monarchy didn't fall. It didn't rise. It quietly changed. Forever. Anne didn't just pass on a title. She revived a legacy. Diana's spirit lives on through Charlotte, guided by Catherine's grace and Anne's strength. Camilla's tears marked more than emotion. They signaled a shift in royal power. Because now, the crown's future has a new name. And it's Charlotte.